This was the workhorse of the British Royal Navy for about 100 years. Basically, it was a 12-inch barrel, very, very sturdy construction, single shot, smooth bore. But here's the thing. This actual pistol we featured in the show that I had on National Geographic Channel called Lords of War. But this could have seen service at the tail end of the American Revolution, being in the 1770s, 80s. Maybe the Battle of Trafalgar, Battle of the Nile. I mean, if you know these historical points, it's like, wow, where could this have been used? And that's the fascination for me.
Tremendous amount of history.
If you have high humidity during the day, you might have issues where it's not going to work. So think about the guys back then who relied on these things.
Wow. Welcome to another episode of History Roundtable. I'm Sean Scott, and this is Sean Rich. And boy, do we have something amazing to show you today. So Sean, what's on the tray today?
What's on the tray today? Okay, so this is a very rare British Royal Navy Sea Service pistol. This was the workhorse of the British Royal Navy for about 100 years, starting with depending on what you read, the pattern 1716, 1718. That's when this pattern came out. There are subtle differences as the pattern was being produced over that 100-year period, but basically it was a 12-inch barrel, very, very sturdy construction, single shot, smooth bore. But here's the thing. After that shot was fired, this was a very, very versatile clubbing whip. And I've even seen depictions of defensive swordplay where these pistols were actually used for defensive purposes. You know, with a thumb through the trigger guard, you could block a sword blade or what have you. So it's really interesting because I've come across examples with impact marks. And I just thought, well, okay, from battle, that was a sword impact, but was it because the guy was using it as he was trained? Who knows? But this actual pistol, the exact pistol, we featured in the show that I had on National Geographic Channel called Lords of War. And we fired it, and I'm actually going to fire it again just to show you how they work because this is in such great condition. And, you know, again, at home, don't do this. Let a professional do a demonstration. Drives me crazy. Anyway, we're gonna show this, and we're actually gonna show it in slow motion so you can see how the parts are working, and you'll see how all of this as one mechanism works depressing the trigger. Now you'll notice on here, there's quite a few interesting parts, but what's holding within the jaws of this hammer is a piece of flint. Now this is stone. This is the same element that the Native Americans would have used for cutting animal hides and making arrowheads. It is so sharp. I can't tell you how sharp. Almost, better than a razor blade, a surgical blade. This will cut you to the bone. So I always stress when people are handling these things, you can accidentally cut yourself and it will ruin your day. Trust me, stitches worthy. Anyway, I'm going to show how these work. This is what they call the battery or a frizzen. This is hardened steel. So I mentioned about the stone being held within the jaws of the hammer, or in terms of the technical terms, it's called the cock. And now there are expressions. Of course, you're going to want to laugh at this. We all do, right? How do you cock your weapon? Well, it goes back to this period. And there's other expressions. Flash in the pan is from the Flintlock period. So we still use some of these expressions, but we had no idea where they came from. Flash in the pan. Good one, right? Mm-hmm. So when this is actually activated.
I'm still not sure about the cock thing.
I know. Well, nobody is. Nobody ever will be. If you can imagine the conversations that my wife has heard about me on the phone talking about and describing. Yeah, well, that's another story. Anyway, so how do we load one of these things? So here is the wood ramrod. You would put the firing mechanism in its half cock stage, okay? You close the frizzen down on the pan. This is protecting the inside chamber of the barrel. You would load your black powder in first, pre-measured probably about 60 grains of 3F. That's the granule size. Then you put in your projectile. Then a wad of, say, newspaper, what have you, to keep the ball in place from when you put the pistol down, it doesn't fall out. It's a lot of technical issues. It's like you got to really prepare for these things. So then you're going to use the ramrod and pack this all down. And now the more you pack it and create the breech pressure, that is going to create more of a muzzle velocity the more you pack that down. So that's not it. When you're ready to fire, you need to flip the frizzen back up forward again. You put priming powder, which is 4F black powder. This is the smallest grain of the black powder as the priming powder. Then you go ready to fire. You put your priming powder in there. You put the frizzen down. Now you're into your firing stage. This is what we're going to demonstrate outside. What happens when I pull the trigger and this rock hits the hardened steel. You're going to see some literal fireworks. Cool stuff.
Amazing.
So let's go do this.
Yeah. So I had a question.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, as far as the viewers and stuff looking at this, so when you see a powder flask, you typically would think that it only contains one grain size of powder in the flask.
Excellent question. So typically, if you were only able to carry 1 grain of powder, it's either 3F or 4F. Any more than that, that's going to be musket and cannon size. And I want to point out, Tony, you can get in here close. On the side of this barrel, there's a tiny little hole. When that priming powder ignites, a jet of fire goes into that little hole, igniting the main charge, then thus sending out the projectile. So if you have grains that are larger than that hole, it's not going to work. You're going to have a malfunction. And there's other issues with black powder. If you have high humidity during the day, you might have issues where it's not going to work. So it's like you got to think about what these people were going through back in the day. You had to have the perfect atmospheric, conditions. I mean, working on some of the movies that I've worked on out on, oceans where there's salt water and high humidity, these things just wouldn't work. So think about the guys back then who relied on these things.
Wow.
I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's
a lot to think about.
It's a head scratch.
Yeah.
So let's go fire this thing.
Very cool.
All right,
let's do this.
It's important to remember that the firing of historical weapons, such as the Flintlock pistol we showcased, is conducted by trained professionals in controlled environments. Attempting to handle or fire these types of firearms at home can be extremely dangerous and is strongly discouraged. Always prioritize safety and seek expert guidance if you wish to learn more about historical weapons. Remember, history is best experienced with respect and responsibility.
I'm ready.
Okay, you ready? Sean, you ready?
I'm only seeing the gun.
Yep.
Go.
1, 2, 3.
That definitely got my ears.
What do you think of this?
I think it's badass.
All right, so here, this marking here, you'll see it says Tower. That denotes the Tower of London Arsenal in London. Then you'll see forward of the hammer an engraved crown over the letters GR. That stands for royalty, and GR stands for George Rex. So this dates for King George III, who reigned from 1760 to 1820. Then you'll also notice there is another mark right here underneath the pan, which is a small crown over an arrow. It's called the broad arrow. That denotes government ownership. Now this, on the barrel, you'll notice there's several markings. There are 2 proof marks. which these are the marks that the Tower of London, who tested the barrels, they would load up to 4 times the amount of powder into one of these barrels to make, and if it survived and didn't blow up, they would approve it by putting these marks on it. Now, there's also a very interesting mark that's not on every one of these pistols that I encounter. It is a broad arrow facing another broad arrow. That was the mark that the arsenal put on weapons that they deemed no longer serviceable to stay in the arsenal. So this gun was at one time declared not up to snuff, and it was decommissioned. And here's another big stamp of the 2 broad arrows facing each other right on the wrist. So they not only stamped it on the barrel, but they also stamped it on the wrist that this is no longer to be kept in stores, sell it as surplus, or supply it to the British East India Company or one of the merchant vessels. But I think it's awesome. I would have never taken this out of rotation. It works beautifully.
Tremendous amount of history. So Sean, as far as the cool factor is concerned, where does this rank?
I know where it ranks. I'm going to ask you, where do you think it ranks? I mean, just on what you're seeing, because this, to me, is one of the pinnacles of, British military pistol manufacture.
Well, I have one question before I answer that then. Okay. What is the purpose of this?
I'm glad you asked. This is the original belt hook. So if you can imagine during boarding engagements, how does one carry all these weapons from ship to ship? They would actually tie a rope around a pair, which is called a brace of flintlock pistols, and they put that rope around their neck. So they'd have multiple pairs, so they could fire, boom, boom, or hand off pairs to other guys who needed them. And I mean, could you imagine getting wonked on the head with that? I mean, that's going to ruin your day no matter what. Yeah. So, I mean, they're very versatile weapon. Oh, and there's another marking here. I just noticed right here. That is the Arsenal storekeeper's mark, and it's an intertwined letters for King George III of GR, and then right underneath it is one of the last dates that this pistol was issued, and it's either in 1800 or 1805. So think about what was happening in 1800 or 1805, that last time that this was issued to go out and be used. But this could have seen service at the tail end of the American Revolution, being in the 1770s, 80s, and then used for maybe the Battle of Trafalgar, Battle of the Nile. I mean, if you know these historical points, it's like, wow, where could this have been used? And that's the fascination for me. So, if you like this kind of stuff, like and follow for more.
History Roundtable, an all-new history series. Don't forget to like and share your favorite episodes. And to learn more about the artifacts on the show, visit tortugatrading.com and commodorecoins.com. Till next time.